everybody, my name is Rachel and welcome to my weekly wrap-up of July 19th, 2015, wherein I tell you about the things that I finished this past week. Hope you guys are having a good week and enjoying your weekend. It is raining, it is very dark and a little gloomy outside right now, and I'm enjoying that a lot. I'd like to go back to bed and read for a while. That probably isn't going to happen though. I'm going to do this in a slightly different order from what I usually do. Usually I talk about books in the order in which I finished them, but this week I'm going to talk about the two books I don't have much to say about first, and they happen to have been the last things that I read this week. And the first one of those is Responsible Responsive Design by Scott Jehl. This is a logical successor or continuation of Ethan Marcotte's Responsive Web Design. These are both published by a book apart. Responsive design is the idea basically of making websites mobile-friendly, device agnostic, so that no matter what you're viewing a website on, it flexes and moves around and shows you stuff, so you can actually read it without pinching and zooming and all that stuff like that. So the basics of responsive design are what Ethan Marcotte covered in his book, which is the HTML, the CSS, the basic media queries, and how to get those working, which is essentially all that I do. I don't go any further than that. Haven't had any need to, but I have an interest in responsive design in general, and I really wanted to know more about the new techniques. So it's been 4 or 5 years since Marcotte's book came out, and a lot of progress has been made, especially like with responsive images, which was a really big problem at first. So Scott Jehl's book, the responsible in the title is the key word here. This is responsive design, but it's much more about usability, accessibility, sustainability, and performance issues beyond just the basics of how to get a website to flex. And yeah, it was interesting. He doesn't go into a lot of like how to code detail like Marcotte's book did, because he's talking about a lot of other things, but he generally introduces a solution to a problem, tells you the very basics of how it actually works, and then sends you to the original resource to actually learn how to implement it, which I thought was pretty good for my uses because, you know, I tabbed the things I was actually interested in learning more about, and I'm not going to be going off back to work or whatever and doing all this stuff. You probably didn't care about that, but I told you about it anyway. The other book that I don't have all that much to say about is Engaging the Enemy by Elizabeth Moon. It is the third book in the Vada's War series, which is a military science fiction series I've been raving about for 3 weeks straight now. I did a review of the first book, I talked about the second book last week, and the third book this week was just as good as the previous ones, though I gave it 4 instead of 5 stars because, I don't know, it was still as intense, but I wasn't as in love with it, and it might be that just maybe I'm reading the books too quickly or something, but, you know, it was a really fantastic book, and there were some interesting interactions between the main character, Kai, and her cousin, Stella, that, like, I was kind of annoyed with Stella and how she was talking to Kai, but I can also see both of their points of view, so that was interesting, and there was some character development going on there, and we are inching our way to finding out who has been trying to destroy the Vada family, and the politics behind the scenes, the much bigger picture is slowly being revealed. So if you haven't guessed already, I love this series and I highly recommend it. So backtracking a little bit, the first thing that I finished this week was Tongues of Serpents by Naomi Novik. It is the 6th book in the Temeraire series, which, if you don't know, is about dragons fighting the Napoleonic Wars. And our main character is Lawrence, his dragon is Temeraire. They're fighting for England. Their previous adventures have sent them to places like China and Africa. And in this book, I was very excited to learn they were going to Australia. I thought, dragons in Australia, early 1800s. I have never read anything like that before. This will be really exciting. This could be really new ground. And then it was freaking boring. Most of the action, big air quotes, are our characters going on this long, ultimately pointless chase across the entire continent of Australia and then back again, having achieved pretty much nothing. The real reason why I dislike this book so much, other than it was just boring, which meant it was a really dull read, but all the dragon characters are super annoying. I don't like Izkirka. If anybody has read the series up to the point where Izkirka is introduced, please tell me if you like her or not. She is the tantrum-throwing brat of all the dragons in this cast. I don't like her, and some of the other dragons, like Caesar, they're insufferable. They're so irritating. So many of the characters were grating on my nerves the entire time. It's just a bunch of people going nowhere for no real purpose and complaining about it. And being unkind to each other. So, the second book that I finished this week, I also did not like at all. Warning! That was Day Shift by Charlaine Harris. This is the second book in her new series called Midnight Texas, which is kind of made up of the leftover secondary characters of her other series. The main character, Manfred, is from the Harper Connolly series. There's another character named Bobo who's from the Lily Bard series, and some other things. Essentially, it is set in the world of Sookie Stackhouse, where vampires are out of the closet, but in this series, they're not really mentioned. It took me until the second book to realize that, like, yes, everybody knows vampires exist. I thought that this was a different world. I thought this was the Harper Connolly world. Anyway, the idea is that Manfred, who is a pierced-tattooed 20-something psychic, moves to this little town called Midnight in Texas, where all the people who live there aren't very normal, are they? Of course not, because this is a Charlaine Harris book. The first book in the series, called Midnight Crossroad, was just okay. And I was expecting the second book to be better because I thought that Charlaine Harris would kind of have gotten some time to get herself into this world and into this series and do something with this cast. It was even more disappointing. The writing continued to be just flat and unimaginative and just poorly written. I mean, when you're starting every single one of your sentences in a paragraph the same way, that's just like rule number one of writing a decent paragraph. Don't start all your sentences in the same way. Was this book edited? It annoyed me so much. On top of this, bad writing. It was an incredibly messy plot. It started off really good because the main character, Manfred, goes for this in-person psychic reading with one of his clients, and then she dies in the middle of the reading, and he has to deal with that. And I thought, this is going to be good, but then there was just subplot after subplot dumped on top of that, and all the solutions to the problems that the characters come up with were kind of dumb. It just went straight to ridiculous land, and I couldn't enjoy it after about the halfway point. I was trying to turn off my brain a little bit, which is not a good sign, and that didn't work either. It just lost me completely. And I think this disappointment is compounded by the fact that the last 3 or 4 or more Harris books that I've read have lacked something really important, have lacked life, have lacked charm, sympathetic characters. Some of the characters in the Midnight Texas series are interesting, but they don't have a lot of character development. You don't get a lot of time focused on one character in particular, and a lot of them feel like stereotypes, like the essence of their character existing is a stereotype. I mean, you have the gay couple that works at the nail salon. Just no. Can we not? I don't recommend this series. If people want to start with Charlaine Harris, I'm going to say Aurora Teagarden, Lily Bard, maybe Harper Connolly, and only the first half of the Sookie Stackhouse series, and just ignore the existence of this trilogy. The final thing that I have to talk to you about this week is Born with Teeth by Kate Mulgrew. It's her memoir. I first heard about this on Effusions of Wit, and then Bree from Stories from the Shelf read it, and everyone has pretty positive things to say about this, so I only knew about Mulgrew as Janeway on Star Trek Voyager, and even though Janeway is not my favorite captain and Voyager is not my favorite Star Trek show, I'm more of a TNG Deep Space Nine person, I was just interested in knowing more about Mulgrew as a person. I thought she did a good job as Janeway, and I was curious, you know, she's got a memoir, what she had to say about herself, and it did not disappoint. This is not an in-depth autobiography. It is not the most well-written of books. It is competently written, and not much more than that. But what it is very passionate and touching and engaging. I sat down and I read this entire book in one sitting. I did not want to put it down. I think the big thing I took away from this memoir is just how professional she is. She lives to work. Her work is what gets her through the hard things. She throws herself right in there, and she's definitely a theater actor. That's like what she seems to really enjoy doing rather than just TV shows all the time. And it was just really interesting to see what she had to say about working so much and the roles she was taking, and kind of how that worked in with her marriage and her children, balancing work and family. The big thing that I think defines this entire memoir is the story of the daughter that she gave up for adoption when she was 22 and then spent decades trying to find. And I think it says a lot that this memoir ends at the conclusion of that story rather than in the modern day. There are like 10 or 15 years of maybe 2000 to 2015 that I don't think Mulgrew talks about at all. The book just sort of ends with the conclusion of the story of the daughter she gave up for adoption and her second marriage. So I kind of wanted a bit more at the end. I wanted to know a little bit more about Mulgrew's family, especially about her mom. There's some stuff kind of hinted about with her mom that she didn't talk about, and I was curious about that. And also, I was curious about some of her more recent work that she didn't talk about. I don't watch Orange is the New Black, but she didn't talk about that at all, and I found that to be kind of interesting. This was very good. I really enjoyed reading this, and I would definitely recommend it to anybody who has any interest in knowing more about Mulgrew. On my Kindle, I'm currently reading Command Decision by Elizabeth Moon, which is the 4th book in the Vada's War series. Sorry, it's early in the morning and I can't count. I'm also reading Mistborn by Sanderson, which, don't hate me, Sanderson fans, I may DNF this one purely because I'm about to lose the book. Somebody else has it on hold and I haven't been reading it very quickly, but also I'm just not finding it to be very interesting. There's nothing wrong with it. I just am so much more interested in reading other things. I'm also halfway through Reamde by Neal Stephenson. I want to finish this in the coming week. I've taken a bit of a break from it though because I binge read like 300 pages in one day and then got kind of tired of it. I was just tired. So I'll pick this up again very soon. The content is really good. The story itself is very interesting, and as usual, I love all of Neal Stephenson's info dumping, but it's a bit too long. This could be like a 600 or 700 page book instead of 1,000 pages, and I'm really feeling that long books are not bad, but I just feel like this could have been trimmed a little bit. That is it for me this weekend. Thank you very much for watching, and I will talk to you guys again in my next video. Bye.